In April 1933, something legendary appeared in the newspapers for the first time, the Loch Ness Monster. But 100 years later, no one has been able to offer any real evidence of its existence, and yet it remains a popular cryptid for many people across the world. So this Halloween, IFLScience Investigates decided to take a deep dive into all things cryptozoology and the Loch Ness Monster. In this bonus episode of The Big Questions, the IFLScience Investigates team, digital content creator Eleanor Higgs, managing editor Katy Evans, and myself, science writer Russell Moul, chew over our experience hunting the supposedly elusive creature in the Scottish Highlands as part of our first ever feature-length documentary. So I think the first question we kind of want to work with is, what did you expect when we started putting this together and you were told you're going to be under Loch Ness to hunt for the Loch Ness Monster? What were the thoughts that kind of went through your mind when you realised you'd been roped into this?
Oh, I was so excited. I mean, this is the dream IFL Science trip. Come on. I have been on some very cool trips this year. I have been to CERN. I've been to all sorts of places. But I was like, oh, Katy, do you want to go to Loch Ness? Yes. Yes, I do.
Yeah, I think I felt the same. It's pretty fun always to go on an IFL Science trip, but to go actively looking for the Loch Ness Monster is pretty cool. And then you can get into all the nitty-gritty science behind it, which is arguably even cooler from my point of view.
Yeah, I mean, this, from my perspective, was a kind of a natural follow-on from what we did last year with the ghost hunting. When we did that, we obviously went to a location, we went to investigate ghostly phenomena, but with the idea of having a look at this from the scientific perspective and putting it within a wider context. And after the success of that, we thought, well, what's next? Well, obviously monsters has got to be on the radar, and what better to start with than the Loch Ness Monster herself? Arguably one of the most iconic cryptids.
I do feel like as, I don't know, supernatural or paranormal or whatever we want to call it, phenomena goes, cryptids are possibly one of the least harmful. In conversations with scientists and researchers that I have spoke to about, you know, a huge range of topics, cryptids come up surprisingly often, and the Venn diagram of, you know, quite serious researchers, zoologists, biologists, who also just love cryptids. Like, the Venn diagram is a circle, man. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, we'd love to go and do things like, you know, Bigfoot and things like that, but there's a bit more of a walk for us being in the UK. So we've had the conversation about what it felt like beforehand, expectations. When you got there, and, you know, we're leading up to the event itself, how did that feel? How did that come across for everybody?
I think I was surprised when we got there to that village just how Nessie-ified everything was. Like, there was Nessie on all the signs, there was Nessie paraphernalia coming out of all the shops. If you wanted socks, a hat, t-shirt, belt, sunglasses with Nessie on, you could literally have anything you could think of. And I didn't think it would be that persistent. Like, it's been a long time, it's, you know, quite well known, but it's not. Well, I didn't think it was going to be so popular still all these years later, and people would be really coming there for that purpose and really buying into it.
Oh, I was fully expecting Nessie mania. I was fully expecting them to have embraced it. I wasn't expecting the sheer number of Highland cows in paraphernalia. I have to admit, I did kind of forget a little bit. The Loch Ness is like in the middle of the Highlands, and we were basically in the middle of mountains. And it was so outrageously beautiful. Like, the actual looking out across the loch is gorgeous. Like, highly recommend for anyone that just wants to go to beautiful, you know, Scottish Highlands. But the thing that I found really surprising on that first day when we went to Drumnadrochit, like you said, we were walking around and there are 10,000 less Nessie gift shops. What I was really surprised by was Nessie comes in every shape and form, you know, Christmas tree decorations and toys and plushies and you name it. But there wasn't really any consensus of what Nessie is. So, like, half of them were kind of like plesiosaurs with flippers, and the other half were sauropods, you know, 4 legs. And then there were the random sort of serpent ones. And I was expecting a slightly more, like, I don't know, like a unified consensus of what Nessie is if you're going to claim it as your cryptid. But there really wasn't.
No. And there was those, all those models, like statues that we kept seeing. None of them really were that alike. One was like barrel shaped, one had like weird cylindrical blobs. One was literally a plesiosaur. Like we kept having the debate as well, flippers or legs. That kept coming up.
But also teeth. Some of them had super sharp teeth, and others were, benevolent, I don't know, herbivore. It was just like, we kind of got there, and we knew one of the questions was going to be, what is Nessie? But I really wasn't expecting it to be, like, on that very first day, like, okay, nobody knows what Nessie is. Like, nobody can agree what Nessie is.
There's a certain element of fun towards that as well, isn't there? I mean, it means that even in the paraphernalia, the question is still there. Everybody's still wondering what the hell this thing even had, down to its representation. How many humps does it have? There's, all our conversations about what, and we'll come to that again a bit later in the conversation. But what do we think Nessie could be if it was real? But that was a dominant feature of it: legs or flippers, or none at all. Fins, a menagerie of ill-conceived and ill-imagined creatures hanging in different shops. But again, I mean, from my perspective, what hit me very quickly was when we first started wandering around and trying to, ingratiate ourselves into the wider world and having conversations with the public, and then some of the shop owners to see if they would go on camera. How many of them weren't put off by, they weren't camera shy. They were fatigued. Yeah,
they were quite over it.
And that was the thing that really shocked me. It wasn't so much, I was half expecting to go up to these people and say, how would you feel about going on camera and answering a few questions about Loch Ness phenomena and all this. And I was expecting to go, oh, no, I couldn't possibly be on camera. Oh, no. Instead, I got a deep sigh followed by, oh, not again. No.
There was a slightly world weariness about it, wasn't it? Yes. Which I was kind of reading as, all right, Nessie is still going strong. Yeah. There were a lot of kind of like, oh, there was a camera crew here just last week. We were like, oh, okay. So people still very invested in the story.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've arrived on location and we're preparing to film. And throughout this whole experience, I felt like everything was quite straightforward. But did you two find that there were any kind of unexpected challenges or hurdles that we had to overcome? Actually, I do have a slight hurdle I had to overcome in it. But I'll let you two talk first.
This is going to sound really stupid. I really don't think I had realised how big Loch Ness is. So, trying to work out the kind of travel distances. I was designated driver. I have been dubbing myself Nessie stunt driver. So actually, like, driving around the loch and being able to find the access points as well. I hadn't realised that you can't just access every single part of the shore, that kind of thing. So actually, we had to kind of get a couple of top tips from some of the locals about like sneaky ways to actually get down onto the shore. So yeah, I think I wasn't sort of expecting that aspect of it, and how long it took and how hard it was to get to the various viewpoints and things that we wanted to access.
Yeah, I definitely expected that we could just get onto the shore like virtually all the way around. I thought that would be easy. And then we, were walking down footpaths that we'd only heard about because people told us.
We were going down that, like, fighting our way through ferns and gorse bushes just to get to the shore.
I definitely didn't think that would be the situation at all. I think also Dom did quite a good job as our cameraman, because it is a challenge to film an interview with one camera or two cameras, set up. So I think that for him was quite challenging, but then he's brilliant, so he made it look easy. Yeah,
no, I mean, I at several points did feel like we were just kind of taking Dom for a walk. It was very much we'd arrive at a location, let him off a lead, and he'd just run off and take photos or get establishing shots of various bits and pieces. Like, oh, well, he'll come back when he's hungry. It was incredible watching him run around. But I suppose what we're doing here is we're trailblazing. Also, this podcast could serve as a how to prepare for your own Nessie hunting trip, because people can now anticipate not finding easy access to the loch and having to drive out of their way and find little places they can pull over and have an actual look at the water. I mean, the bit for me that was the surprising challenge, and it doesn't turn up too much in the documentary itself, is obviously us filming the model in the water, and the unexpected moment for me was discovering how unbelievably slimy rocks are in the loch, and that they're very difficult to stand on when you're barefoot.
Well, you started off ankle deep, you ended up about thigh deep.
Thigh high.
In the loch. I don't think it was warm. It was slippery. At one point, you were doing some kind of yoga to balance on a rock. Dom was filming, and Eleanor and I were on the floor crying with laughter behind the camera.
It was
no words
comedy
could
Dom.
come out.
If I go over now, it's going to be really embarrassing.
Yeah.
Get it, Dave?
She wants to be free.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a hurdle I was not expecting. But hey, we persevered and got over it.
The things we do for journalism, honestly.
From your perspectives, did being at the loch make you feel as though the myth was more real and more believable, or less so?
Less so. I'm
So.
really sorry, everybody. Look, I love a cryptid. I really do. I am a big fan of just really fun, hopefully harmless stories that also then kind of like you can sneak in the science and get people really interested in actual science. But yeah, I think once I actually got there, one of the things that I'd sort of heard when people talk about their experiences with, you know, what they'd seen, and they talk about, well, you know, it's a loch. And again, for listeners, a loch is just the Scottish word for lake. So it's a, you know, enclosed body of water. And as people talking about, oh, you know, something creating ripples in the water and it's a loch and nothing creates waves. Well, we got there and immediately we were like, we can see waves all over the place, especially when we were down in Fort Augustus. And I know that like the middle of the loch is incredibly deep. What did Steve the skipper say? You could fit two Edinburgh castles in it, kind of like on top of each other. But around the edges, it's obviously quite shallow, like especially with Fort Augustus, which a lot of boats are going in and out of. They actually had like buoys roping off the channel for where boats can go, which means that it is a lot shallower than I thought. So there were definitely rocks under the water that were creating ripples. And I was like, well, I hadn't really considered that at all. But that's your first thing. That's quite an obvious explanation, which sort of debunks anyone saying, oh, there are no waves in lochs.
When you look at those breakers, you could be fooled into thinking there was a creature there.
Yeah.
When in reality, it's probably just large rocks that are disturbing the water.
People have spoken about seeing the Loch Ness Monster, and other people saying, actually, you know, you've probably seen rocks or something. Although I don't think that, you know, there's a Loch Ness Monster out there necessarily. I couldn't understand how the rock explanation worked, but now I'm here and looking. Yeah, you can definitely think if you look at those rocks.
You can see that where it's changed, your eye is drawn to it.
Yeah, there's definitely, you could, if you were being very generous with yourself, you could think there's something there breaking the water.
Yeah, and then we got a good description of how the science of the waves work, didn't we? How the wind blows in from one direction and pushes all the water towards the other side of the loch, and then that kind of elastically rebounds it, and then it is going against the wind again, so it also churns it up. So you actually have, it's a moving piece of water, and it's not a still body, it's active.
Yes, seiches, they're called.
Yeah, and that was wasn't that the undercurrent as well?
Yeah,
I can't remember off the top of my head.
The waters of Loch Ness can also play other tricks that can make normal things behave abnormally. For instance, seiches are standing waves that can occur on enclosed or semi-enclosed bodies of water like Loch Ness. They can cause variations in the water's height at different points of the loch, creating localized currents that move in unusual or contradictory directions.
I was going to say, actually being there, I think it's more believable. I think you get sucked in more to the story. I think because everything surrounding you is so... There's so much like Nessie stuff, and the people there are so used to the story and are used to all the ideas. I feel like it's almost more believable, maybe I should say, because there's still a part of me that's like, well, it's just waves, it's just trees, it's just dogs swimming.
To counter that, so we went to the Loch Ness Centre and we did the Loch Ness Experience, which is actually really, really fun. You are greeted with David Tennant's dulcet tones. I was sad that he was not there to actually give the tour. But what I thought was so good about the Loch Ness Centre experience, I was really expecting it to kind of like come down hard on, ooh, you know, the mystery, because obviously their livelihood is based on the myth of Nessie. But it was such a balanced presentation. They went through all of the science, all of the experiments and expeditions and various things that have, been carried out in the lake to try and find out what they can find out. And they presented it all. And, you know, There were lots of times within the experience where they were showing that actually science was debunking various different theories. And I came out of it just like, I'd learned so much. So like you were saying about the seiches, about the different temperatures when you have warm water at the top of a lake and cold water at the bottom, and how that movement can create waves, but also wind, all the different environmental factors. They were lots of things that I hadn't considered at all. So I thought it was a really great experience, but I was also really impressed with the amount of science that they also give to the viewer.
Yeah, they really leave it to the viewer to make their own mind up, but I felt they weigh much more towards the science side of it. I did not come away from that experience feeling like they were necessarily saying it was equally, the mystery's here. I felt for every aspect of the mystery, for every bit of the folklore, for every bit of the story, they had an answer.
Yeah.
I didn't come away from that thinking that there was any hook that was left unexplained, any slither of the narrative of, this doesn't make sense. Actually, every phenomena could be explained by something that was covered there. But they nevertheless kind of leave it up to you to decide, and they don't kind of hammer you with that. They don't avoid entertaining these stories. So I thought that was probably one of the most balanced experiences I've had, really, in that kind of diorama experience, where you come away with a very firm idea of both sides of the argument. And then it just comes down to personal taste. But from my own perspective, there was a moment when we were on the boat, and we unfortunately couldn't share the footage because Steve is keeping it to himself. But Steve, the skipper, showed myself and Katy the footage he captured in 2019. And it is quite compelling. And if you're just really trying to get into the enthusiasm of it, you could quite easily find yourself going, wow, this really does challenge what I'm thinking. But when you step back from it, there's still many, many, many questions around it that still don't quite work.
Oh my goodness, hands down best footage I have ever seen. Eleanor, I know you didn't get to see.
I'm still so bitter about that. That is my biggest disappointment from the entire Nessie trip, that I didn't quite manage to be in the room when Steve was showing you the footage.
Well, Russ nearly missed it as well. I mean, I think you were doing some establishing shots on the boat, and I just happened to be chatting to Steve, and he suddenly opened up his laptop and started showing me his footage, and I was like, Russ, get over here. But yeah, it is amazing because, it shows the loch, it shows ripples, and I was thinking, oh, here we go, it's just going to be ripples. And then literally two dark humps appear out of the water. And it was a bit of a kind of blink and you miss it. And I was like, what, was that it? Oh no, that wasn't it. It kept going again. I was like, oh, this is what the hell is that? Yeah, that was a real okay, what is that moment? And, I think Steve is very genuine in his, appreciation of Nessie and his belief that there is something out there. It's a very big body of water, and it's not that outrageous that there's something in there that hasn't been seen before. I did kind of later, I was like, oh, the cynic in me is just, anyone can fake footage. But in the moment, I really was like, oh, this is the best footage I've ever seen. Yeah,
and there was that moment of, it was a special feeling, wasn't it? We're seeing something that not many, because I asked initially if it had been shared on or publicly, if it had been shared online, and was very quickly told, no, not at all. And I'm not sharing it with anybody. And that kind of, it gives you that feeling of being given an insight into something that's very special and secretive. We have knowledge that very few people have of something, and so it can be very, very easy to fall into the this is it. But as you said, actually there's no way of confirming that what it is we're seeing at all. But yeah, that was quite a powerful moment. But the whole thing we've seen so far, it does raise this question about how do we feel about this relationship between folklore, tourism and science, because this is very much a site where those things combine. And you might have views on the mythology, you might have views on the problems with tourism or before tourism, and whether or not they have any relationship with science. Not something that usually comes together. So what do we think on that?
I think it's quite an interesting combination. I think talking to the locals was quite interesting, because they were all saying, oh, it all stops. A few people come here maybe in the winter, but compared to August, people aren't coming here in mid-December to look for Nessie. The boat tours all stop. It all goes. But in terms of the science, I think when you've got an unanswered mystery, it makes people want to find out more. The amount of stuff that they've put in the loch, cameras and ROVs and all sorts to kind of discover what Nessie could be. They did that eDNA test. They've done all sorts. So that is getting more science out of it, even if they never find Nessie, about what is actually in the loch, which is really cool.
This is what I mean when I was saying that I think cryptids are relatively harmless. I think, you grab people with the hook of like a fantastical, mythical creature and then you hit them with the science. Like Elle was saying, there is loads of science that has been carried out in the loch, everything from some of the first eDNA testing in the water. But even Boaty McBoatface, that was tested out in there as well. So I think if it had just been a random loch, then, maybe it wouldn't. So I think the using the tourism, but then also the science that's carried out there is really interesting. I'm writing a feature for our November issue of Curious, which you'll be able to read as well. Yes. So I'm talking about what would happen if we actually found Nessie and how searching for lost species, how it actually works. And one of the things that kept coming up, I think, was a BBC article in like the early 2000s where they were speaking to the Scottish Nature Agency, government agency. And they came up with a sort of jokey set of rules about, if Nessie was ever found, it would immediately come under Scottish wildlife protection laws. So, it can't be hunted, it can't be killed, it can't be removed from the loch. So I really wanted to speak to the people to, kind of talk about this. I think it's a really interesting idea and a sort of, jumping off point to talk about, is it a good idea to have protections in place for lost species before you find it, or like how quickly you can get protections in place afterwards. Unfortunately, they did come back to me and say it was just a joke in 2001. So they don't actually have protections, which is a bit sad because quite a few people, when we were in Drumnadrochit and around Loch Ness, they were very proud that Scotland actually had protections for Nessie. So I'm really sorry to burst your bubbles, guys. But I also just thought, well, I'm really sorry, Scotland, but that's such a missed opportunity, because what a fantastic way to grab the public's attention and then talk to them about your protection laws, and your wildlife in Scotland. That would have been a great way to like properly pull people in to the science. So I do feel like there's a little bit of a missed opportunity, and perhaps they will hear this and they will rethink their policy and actually put protections in place for Nessie.
We should start a petition.
You heard it here first, guys.
Yeah.
If it happens, it was IFLScience who made it.
Yeah, we push that forward. What do you think? Was there anything that hasn't made it into the documentary that you think should have? Or what was your favourite moment that hasn't featured in the documentary?
Russ, I feel like you need to explain to the listeners just why you were doing yoga on a rock.
I've been wanting to do this for a while, to recreate some of the traditional hoax things that go with some of these beliefs out there, and one of which was creating my own version of the surgeon's photo. And I had a wonderful opportunity, obviously, because we were going to Loch Ness, that I might be able to do this myself. When the surgeon story became public in the 1930s, it obviously caught everybody's mind, everybody's imagination, and it really solidified that idea that Nessie was a plesiosaur sticking its head out of the water. And that really knocked around in the public sphere for decades after that, and never really, although skeptics grumbled about it, nobody ever really challenged it formally until the 1980s. I think there was a study that was published that kind of looked at it in perspective to the rest of the features around it and realized that it's actually very small, and they estimated that it was actually probably a bird, a seabird that had been photographed above the water. But then in 1994, one of the individuals who was involved in actually creating it came forward and explained how they made it. And it was like a deathbed confession that this had all been a particularly entertaining and very, very petty hoax towards the Daily Mail. And they'd made it using a toy boat, a kid's toy boat, and a plasticine head. And there's a diagram that's been published of how they did that. So I wanted to do my own version, which involved me using papier-mâché and buying a kid's toy boat from Amazon, which I beautifully got to charge on company expenses, which was a great fun thing to be able to claim a kid's toy boat for £8. And then what followed was a couple of weeks of me just randomly experimenting with this in various bodies of water to try and figure out how I can get its buoyancy correct. And then came to the conclusion that I was just going to have to do a bit of a job of it and then adjust it on the day.
The adjusting on the day was just, I think that was the classic moment, because poor Russ was trying to get the thing to float upright for enough time that Dom could film it, but you were shoving rocks into the plasticine when they just weren't staying in, so you'd get it just about right, and then there'd be a plop as a rock fell back into the loch and the whole thing would tip, and it was honestly brilliant.
Incredible.
In my defence, I didn't expect that part to be filmed. I was just doing that as a test of the expectation of doing it properly the next day. This was supposed to be a pilot, but it all got filmed, and that was what was going on. I mean, the bit that I found most impressive about that was I had to carry that on the aeroplane. It was too delicate to put in my luggage, so I had to go to Heathrow with a bag of camera equipment and a bloody toy boat dinosaur sticking out the bag, and it had to go through the X-ray machine. And I was so prepared to be pulled aside and asked, what is this, sir? What is this in your bag? And to try and come up with something to explain it. But they just ushered me through. Clearly, I've seen it all before.
I wish we had that X-ray photo of your bag from Heathrow Airport with just the fake Nessie model inside.
God knows what they thought. But yeah, they just waved me through. So, but then that first day was me testing it out. I knew what I then had to do, put in enough plasticine the next day to get the weight right, and then we filmed it the second day, and it worked perfectly. In fact, it worked too perfectly. So we found a better beach for me to wade out into. And it was shallower and the rocks were smaller, so I wasn't slipping about all over the place. But it gradually, as you stepped out, went further and further and deeper. And I put this thing into the water and it floated perfectly. And I'd made it so perfectly that I'd basically made a small boat because it picked up the wind and started shooting further out into the loch. So I had to lunge after it into deeper water where I got even wetter. But yeah.
It was worth it.
It was definitely worth it. Okay, so who was the most interesting person we met along the way?
Oh, we all know what we're going to say here. Kenny!
Kenny, if you listen to this, you made it for us. For those who don't realise, Kenny is a staff member of the Loch Ness Centre, and he graced us with his insights and his views on the Loch Ness Monster, and it was a wonderful experience.
He is delightful, and if you ever go to Loch Ness and you go to the Loch Ness Centre, I promise you will know who Kenny is. We don't even need to describe him. You will know the second you get there.
And do you know what? You say to anybody like I do when I go in there, what's the first thing you think of when you come to Loch Ness? You would think the scenery. Oh, stunning. It's the same answer.
Yeah, I mean, it might be you now.
Well, mate,
Were there any key takeaways from all of this? If you had to be a serious person reflecting on this whole adventure of going out and looking for a cryptid in this location, what was your takeaway point?
There weren't lots of conversations about what Nessie is. People didn't seem to be as interested in claiming what type of creature Nessie was. It was much more about they'd seen something, or that the loch was mysterious, or that something could exist in there that we don't know about, that's a possibility. We talked earlier about what kind of animal it might have been. So Steve, the skipper, who took us out on the boat, he talked about it looked like it had sort of rolling humps and that it moved in a serpentine kind of manner, because we were talking about all the sort of animals that had been ruled out because there was no DNA evidence of them in the loch. But eels, I think there were many eels in the loch.
Many eels.
But they did find eel DNA in most of the samples, so they currently think that Nessie is most probably a giant eel. It was definitely swimming with the serpentine motion as opposed to like an eel swims. Very sort of side to side motion. It was definitely up and down and coming out of the water.
Eel is obviously one of the top contenders for possible sightings, but as he was pointing out, eels kind of move from side to side in the same way that sea snakes do and stuff. But this was like a rolling serpentine sort of thing. But even he was he didn't want to claim what kind of animal it might be. The emphasis was definitely more on the unknown. So I think people are more interested in the idea that something could exist that we don't know about, rather than trying to answer what it is. So that's kind of what I took away from it.
What matters is the possibility. And that's why this thing is very much alive. We spoke to all the different people, and every time we asked them what they think it is, each person gave us a different idea. Nobody had a kind of solid idea in their mind. They just wanted there to be something out there that science hasn't quite claimed yet. The idea of still having, monsters on the edge of the map. The world hasn't been completely filled in yet. Yeah, that was kind of one of my takeaways. And that actually, the tourism here has the benefit of keeping the science going and learning more about the loch and the ecology in its own right, but equally keeping a bit of enchantment in the world still, which I thought was very interesting.
Yeah, I think it was quite charming how much everyone cared about the idea of something. Like, even if it wasn't, became an otter or a big fish or an eel, they still, most of them wanted to protect it. When we asked people what they would do if Nessie was real or if they saw it, they said they take pictures, they said they keep it to themselves even. Nobody said, oh, I'm going to make a fortune, I'm going to Jurassic Park Nessie. It was all, it was very caring, which I thought was quite touching.
So if Nessie was discovered, say you were the person who discovered Nessie, what would you want it to be? And what would you do with that?
I would want it to be a plesiosaur, because that would be so cool. Or some sort of ancient marine reptile or dinosaur or something like that. I mean, something that we don't have now, right? I'd want it to be some sort of new species. Ideally, a great big ancient toothy beastie with flippers.
Yeah, definitely. If we're leaning into cryptids, I want my money's worth.
So, no, not a meg or something like that in the water then.
I mean, I'm not saying no to a meg. I don't think it's a meg. I feel like that is a whole... Tune in, 2026 spooky season, guys.
I'm an old Lovecraft fan, so I'm hoping it's some sort of, some outer entity that's lurking in there. Something really mystical and weird. But hey, probably lots of eels.
What do I want it to be and what do I actually think it could be is like a different question. I think...
Yeah, because what I think it could be is, a stick. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, a stick, a tyre, a bird, a boat,
an
otter, all of these things. I mean, the biggest thing, actually, my biggest takeaway from all of this, and I think this is something it didn't make it into the documentary, and it certainly had impact on all of our lives while we're out there, as we finally learned the word for how seals move and how otters kind of move across land, that they galump.
It's a beautiful word.
I think that's made it in. I think I say galump.
It did make it in. You made it on the beach. Yeah. You said it on the beach before we finish off. But yeah, we learned collectively that word, that seals galump, and that was extremely important. But on that, what would you do if you found it? If you were the person that discovered it?
Well, as the managing editor of IFLScience, I feel like I should want to say that is the scoop of the century, and you heard it here first. IFLScience finds Nessie. Like, that would be the dream. But yeah, talking to the people that just were really passionate about the idea of it, but also, they were really passionate about if it was an animal. So many people wanted it to kind of be left alone, and I think that is what I came away with. I was like, oh, our boss might kill me. But if we had found Nessie, I would have been really, really, really tempted to just let it be, because I think the myth is delightful. It's not harming anything, but actually announcing to the world that, either an immediately incredibly endangered new species in a huge tourist hotspot, I don't think the creature would fare well out of that, unfortunately. So I think I would be very tempted to just not tell anyone.
Yeah, I agree.
I think how popular Drumnadrocket was when we were there, sort of early September. If we found Nessie, suddenly that village is going to be absolutely... its population is going to quadruple if there's a real legitimate animal to see. So, yeah, I think I'm with you, Katie. I think I would just keep it to myself.
That seems to be quite a surprising answer, actually. When you two were talking to Kenny, myself and Dom went off to interview a family, and I asked two kids who are part of the family what they think it is and what they would do if they found it. And one of them said he wouldn't tell anybody. He'd want to keep that secret to himself, and I thought that was very touching. His sister then turned around and said she'd like to make all the money out of it, and I thought that's far more practical. And what would you do if you discovered it?
I'd use it to get rich.
You'd use it to get rich?
Yeah.
That's the best answer.
That's the thing as well. You've got to think about the impact on you, because if you become the person to say, I found Nessie, that's your name in the history books forever.
Absolutely. I mean, we've seen that in the history itself. The thing that started this all, Audi Mackay, the woman who made the first story about Loch Ness become, public spectacle. She herself apparently didn't want any attention. She gave the story of the thing that she saw, the whale-like thing in the water, and then it took off and was dragged into the history books as a consequence. So, yeah, any name that can be attached to this story suddenly is part of history. Maybe we will find ourselves now, the four of us, part of the the history books of Loch Ness.
Well, yes. I mean, much like, the whole is Nessie real or not? IFLScience went to Loch Ness to find the Loch Ness Monster. Did we find it? Well, guys, we've just told you that even if we did, we wouldn't tell you.
Yeah. So how do you know we haven't? I think that's probably then the best place for us to leave it. You'll never know.